Hello, everyone. I hope you are well and in good spirits. Really appreciate everyone stopping by. So as folks continue to pour in, as always, we're going to go over just a quick housekeeping rules. So first, we're asking all attendees to remain on mute throughout the conversation. However, we do want to hear your inputs and insights during the discussion, so please feel free to share your thoughts and utilize the chat. I also want to make mention that this discussion will be recorded, and also that indicates it on the top left corner of your screen. We'll talk a little bit more later about where you'll be able to find this actual recording online as well. So my name is Kyle Tribble. I serve as Director of Culture and Community Engagement here at the district's DEI office. I had the pleasure of moderating this great panel discussion today. With that, I want to welcome you all to the Equity in Practice series. For those who are not familiar, the Equity in Practice series is a collection of community learning opportunities hosted by the district's DEI office in collaboration with district staff, community advocates, community-based organizations, all of which who are focused on equity, cultural awareness, and social justice. I want to wish everyone a happy Jewish American Heritage Month. So May is Jewish American Heritage Month, and is a perfect opportunity where we can recognize and celebrate the rich history, culture, and contributions of Jewish Americans. Throughout our discussion, we'll aim to bring out a lot of these themes and bring these themes to life by highlighting personal stories and also fostering dialogue around culture and inclusion. So for those who are unable to join today's session, you may be in the classroom or wherever the case may be, we encourage you to share this video and view this video and view this conversation at our DEI YouTube page, which you can find at SDP Office of Diversity Equity 7097. And I'll be sure to send this video out to all those who registered. So without further ado, we can jump right in and introduce our panelists. And first, we'll start with Carly. So Carly Paul is the Manager of Education at the Weizmann National Museum of American Jewish History. With a passion for fostering educational experiences beyond the classroom walls. She works with teachers directly to create meaningful field trips at the museum. She runs all of the museum's free family day events and provides professional learning workshops for educators both in person and virtually. A former third grade teacher in both School District of Philadelphia and the Abington School District. She brings firsthand classroom experience to her work with educators and students. Carly lives in the Fairmount neighborhood with her husband, Thomas, and their two daughters, Willow and Remy. Thank you so much for joining, Carly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. Next, we have Hannah Geller. Hannah serves as the video specialist for the International Marketing and Communications team over at American Jewish Committee, also known as AJC, the premier global Jewish advocacy organization. So Hannah oversees all video production and strategy, translating AJC's international advocacy and educational efforts into inspiring content that be seen on phone screens and big screens. Her videos are watched by millions annually, including celebrity PSA series called Voices Against Anti-Semitism, and inspire thousands to take action on AJC's key issues. Hannah is a graduated magna cum laude from Penn State with a BA in film and video production, where she helped produce an Emmy-nominated documentary called Quiet Sundays, filmed in London. Hannah was recently selected as one of the 150 global participants in the first cohort of Voice of the People, President Halsar's initiative for shared Jewish culture. Outside of her job, she loves to travel, design modern Jewish art, and host a large Shabbat meals. Thank you so much for joining, Hannah. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So our final panelist is Jared Jackson. Jared is the founder and executive director of Jews in All Hues, an education and advocacy organization that builds a world where intersectional diversity and dignity are normative. Jared is a Philly-born multi-heritage Jew. Jared is an internationally renowned Jewish diversity leader, consultant, facilitator, speaker, writer, and musician, and as well entrepreneur. He is an alumni of a Salah Leadership Program through the Ben Arc, the Jewish Partnership for Justice. Jared holds a certificate in nonprofit management from LaSalle University and was named one of the Jews that will change the world in periodical Ma'ariv. Along with everything else, in May of 2021, Jared graduated from Hebrew Union College with a Master's of Arts in Jewish Nonprofit Management. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we could jump right into the conversation. So I have a brief question, and I think we can start with Carly for this one. This question for the whole panel. Carly, briefly outline how has your Jewish identity shaped your personal values, your traditions, and your career path?
Sure. So I think that for me personally, there's been an ebb and flow throughout my life of my engagement with the Jewish community and my Jewish community and what that looks like for me and my Jewish identity. I think now, as I said, as Kyle mentioned, I have two young daughters. Especially since COVID, we do a Friday night Shabbat with our family, our nuclear family, plus with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law every Friday, and it just, with the hectic ness of our lives, it's just a way to slow down and have that ingrained in now our schedule every Friday night. So I appreciate that tradition, and I'm glad we started it during COVID, and it has continued even out of it. As far as my career path, that's definitely been a winding road. I started in the public school sector as a public school teacher. I was one of the very few Jewish teachers in my school, and I was definitely, there were not many Jewish students in my classes. And so I don't think that my Jewish identity really guided that career trajectory at first, graduating from grad school and finding that position. But I took a break during COVID from teaching. And after October 7th, I really was like, how can I use my education background and my expertise and have a broader impact and broader scope in what today's landscape is, because it was very different from when I left teaching in 2020. And so that's why I turned to the museum educator route, and that's how I got here. And it's definitely been a learning experience and very different, but I do feel like I've been able, the larger audience that it affords me. And just talking with teachers more so and getting outside of that student box has been really, really enlightening and enriching for me. And I hope also for the same for them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Carly. I'm going to go to Jared next on this particular question, which is, how has your Jewish identity shaped your personal values, traditions, and career path?
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Kyle. Nice to see everyone. I think for me, it's the other way around. I think my values have shaped my Judaism and my career path. I was born in Philly, but I grew up in Williamsboro, New Jersey, and being one of very few Jewish students at that time, but also being one of few Black Jewish students, helped me shape my identity. Also, Judaism for me wasn't something that I could be out in the Jewish community with because of racism in my local Jewish community there. So me and my sisters took it like a 14-year absence from being inside of Jewish community. Not to say it was a vacation, but it was just a break. And inside the home, doing Jewish holidays, taking off from school for Yom Kippur, etc. Although it would look a little bit different for my sisters and I, where we wouldn't necessarily go to synagogue or anything. We would watch Sanford and Son reruns, fasting and laughing. That was our thing. But really, the push for social justice, the push for equality, those values that were taught by my parents, mostly my mom, because my father died when I was almost 3. Those values that even continued beyond his life, that were instilled in myself and my sisters, going to marches, helping phone banking for the ACA. Not the ACA, sorry, Americans with Disability Act. One slight letter removal. Um, and other things helped me to get back into Jewish community where I could pursue justice even more as an adult. I started off going to school for jazz studies at University of the Arts. May it be a blessing. And lots of turns later, getting into including colleges and ending at Rowan University with my bachelor's degree. I was geared to be a music educator, but there was a calling for pursuing justice through a Jewish lens and through an intersectional lens, where I could bring all of my Blackness, all of my Jewishness, and not have to decide to leave anything beside the conversation and be who I am. So again, the values help shape my career path.
Thank you so much for that, Jared. Appreciate it. I want to move on to you, Hannah. Any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I love the question. I think it's a great way to set the scene of what Jewish American life can really look like. So I will just say before I really answer, for context, I was born and raised in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. So if you know it, it's a pretty small town, and it's not at all a Jewish town. And over the years, especially when I went to college at Penn State, I was exposed to different types of Jews and different types of Judaism. And since then, I actually decided to take on observance. So I now consider myself an Orthodox Jewish woman. It's not how I grew up. And that gives me the perspective to see just how beautiful and the range of Jewish practice can be. So just keep this in mind when you're hearing my answers today. I'm coming from you from that kind of perspective. So for me, I think Judaism has given me all my values. I don't know who I would be and how I would be shaped without these Jewish values that are like loving your neighbor as yourself, speaking honestly, being humble, emphasizing kindness, visiting the sick, and giving to the poor. We are commanded to give at least 10 or 20% of our income to charity every year. These kinds of things, I think, are the beautiful, rich values in Judaism that really guide me day to day in every single thing that I do. And traditions wise, it's a very beautiful, happy, and inspiring tradition that's thousands of years old. So it gives me that framework of, okay, when I go to the supermarket, what food can I buy? And when it comes time to light Shabbat candles every Friday night, what do I do after that? It's a way that I can disconnect and I can make certain things on this world a little bit holier, a little more special than the mundane throughout the week. So I'm very grateful to have that, and for it to also have shaped my career path. I work for AJC, American Jewish Committee, as you said, Kyle, and I obviously now dedicate my life to advocating for the Jewish people's ability to live the most happy and just open to whatever kind of way that they want to live their life, direction that they choose for themselves around the world.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate that. I think we got to learn a little bit more about you all with that. But I want to follow up with this question. I'm gonna direct it to Carly, if I may. Carly, can you share key aspects of Jewish American culture and traditions that you feel are important for others to understand?
Yeah, and I think that my fellow panelists kind of just touched on this. I think that it's important to understand that Jews are not monolithic, that there aren't specific boxes that you can necessarily check off and then you can say, okay, now I'm Jewish. I think there's a range of ethnicities, of races, of cultural backgrounds, of different ways that you want to celebrate your Jewishness, or opposing that, ways that you don't want to celebrate your Jewishness. We come from every corner of the globe. There's Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Mizrahi traditions that all vary too, even in the way that our Torahs, our holy book, looks and what we read from every Shabbat. And so I think that also from specifically the Jewish American lens, that's also another layer to it. Some people say themselves as Jewish American, maybe you're American Jewish, and maybe you put values in different priorities the way that you live your lives, and that also has an increase in multiracial and interfaith families too. So, with those intersecting identities that Jared touched on as well, I think that's important to keep in mind and understand and honor the diversity. And I think that helps challenge, different stereotypes and deepens the cultural awareness of Jewish identities in every way, shape, and form.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And Han, I want to get your thoughts on this particular question as well, and I'll reread it for you. Can you share key aspects of Jewish American culture and traditions that are important for others to understand? I know you mentioned a piece before, but just want to see if you have further thoughts.
Absolutely. So I think that Carly's really beautifully spoken about Shabbat so far, so I want to touch on that a little bit. Shabbat is the Jewish Sabbath, so it's the idea that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested, and there was no work done. Everything was complete at that point. So we take that concept, and it's laid out for us what this means in this modern physical world that we live in. And basically, it means that we just stop and we disconnect. We stop our work. We stop cooking. We've cooked everything already at that point. So you can imagine Friday's a busy day. And then we just get to take it easy. We're surrounded by our family. Hopefully, we're inviting some friends or some strangers into our home to enjoy a meal together and to spend this time that is really meant for reflection and for connection with each other, with ourselves, and with God. And so the practical implication means, someone who observes the Sabbath in whatever way they do, maybe they need to log off work a little bit earlier. Maybe they can't attend a class that's going on Friday evenings. These are just little logistical things that we consider, or at least that I consider, and many other Jews do as well, in order to fit that framework that we have set for ourselves. So Jewish American culture, to the bigger question, I think that they go hand in hand, just like Jewish culture goes with every other culture around the world that we live in as the diaspora. We're all over the world. So Jewish American, it's very special. We're known for our bagels and lox, amongst other things, but we are a very rich, hundreds of years old culture in America, and I don't see it going anywhere.
Thank you for that, Han. I really appreciate it. This next question, I'm going to start with you, Jared, just so we could just see and just learn more about historical figures. So the question is, what are some historic or even modern Jewish American figures that others should know about, in your opinion? Maybe that's someone that's not being taught in school, or maybe not getting the publicity that should be there.
Well, thank goodness. It's hard for me to draw names because there's a whole list of names just came out of my head. Um, I'll say that there were a few. Oh man, I'm sorry. I might have to
Oh, no, no worries, because
to look back at my notes for a second because there are some figures that I know of, like there, especially Jews of color who have argued cases in front of the Supreme Court and been involved in the 1960s and 50s civil rights movement. Who weren't featured because of racism at the time. They're like, you can't be black and Jewish at the same time, or you can't be Hispanic and Jewish, which is that's for no one to say. Currently, I mean, there's there's Yadila McCoy who did a lot of great work before I came on the scene, and some really great work after, as far as building awareness for Jews of color. There's Sheila Katz, the current CEO of National Council for Jewish Women. National Council of Jewish Women. Um, and Rabbi Daniel Ruttenberg. Um, there's so many figures that I can think of who are amazing educators. Um, Also, like even some people I know on my board who are amazing educators, like not Chase, sorry, Julianne Rollins Rishon and Gray Higgins, sorry, Gray Higgins, who are amazing educators who work for various organizations. I know Gray works for Ben the Ark and was instrumental in one of the campaigns. He was campaign manager of one of our current city council members, um, and Nicholas O'Rourke. And so there are people who are behind the scenes, like working for the betterment of our future here in this country, who are Jews of color, who are part of the Jewish community, um, regardless of what they look like, who have our best interests at heart and actually listen to the people as they move along, and including before they move.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Jared. And Hannah, I want to ask you the same question. Are there any historical figures or even modern figures in the Jewish American community that you feel like need to be heard about a little bit more?
Sure. So someone who I hope many people on this call know about already, but I'll just say to give her some extra shout outs are Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was the Supreme Court Justice and a real trailblazer for gender equality. Oh, and here you go. Alexis popped in the chat right then at the same time, her name. And I was just thinking about some people who maybe are not being thought of and going under the radar. So I just wanted to give a really major shout out to Rachel Goldberg and John Poland, who are the parents of the American Israeli hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland. And they fought tirelessly every day in an incredibly strong way for their son to come home. And sadly, he did not come home alive, but he is someone that I think the world knows about because of these very strong, very proud American Jews. And the other person who came to mind, who's more of a recent history figure, is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, so Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And he's someone who is known not only in the Jewish community for his warmth and the emphasis on loving your fellow, though he really put a strong value on education to the point where there's actually a US Education and Sharing Day every year that is around the time of the Rebbe's birthday to remember this and his contributions to American society. So not only Jewish society, but American society as a whole.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I heard education, and I also saw that history was mentioned in your answer, Hannah. So I want to go for our next question. I want to direct it to Carly, and then I'm going to come back to you, Hannah, if that's okay. But I want to know, why is it important for Jewish history and culture to be taught and not just limited to the Holocaust?
Yeah, sure. I think this is something that, we talk about a lot, especially when we're talking in our professional learning workshops and working with teachers, that we want students to understand, we want teachers to understand that Jewish history and culture spans thousands of years, and spans across the globe. And by limiting education to just the Holocaust and that point in time, it really flattens this long, rich diversity, and this like complex story of a people, and it limits it to a story just about victims and persecution. And it leaves out a whole bunch of other things. It is obviously vital to remember to teach about it. I don't want to downplay that in any way, but by just teaching it through the lens of persecution, I think that we are missing the point of teaching students about Jewish people as a whole. It should be placed in a broader context, of who they are. That should be like the first part, who Jewish people are. They didn't start in 1930s and end in 1945. Who about Jewish resilience and creativity and contributions, and then also definitely Jewish joy. We want to make sure that we're sharing and teaching about Jewish joy. And I just want to say that there should be a before Holocaust education, there should be an after Holocaust education, and that should all be about, you know, about that broader context and teaching about that in a greater scope than it is. And I understand that it's hard when you're in the classroom and you have a limited amount of time to do what you need to do and you have to follow a pacing guide and things like that. But even if it's like just trying to set that background knowledge and really make sure that there aren't students walking away with any misconceptions is really important.
Thank you so much for that, Carl. Jared, I saw you come off mute. Do you have any thoughts on this question as well, or?
Oh, I had no idea I came off mute.
Oh, no. If not, no worries.
Sorry, but yes, I do. I do have some thoughts, and thank you, Carly, for mentioning all that, because that is also my gripe with a lot of education around Jewish community, but also, the fact that there are multiple Jewish histories that involve people of color, Jewish people of color, right, and that there are there are histories before 1619, right? There are histories long before, because Jews started out as people of color. Being folded into whiteness is only like the past 45 years of Jewish history, and it's not the whole of Jewish history. So when I hear people educating on any subject that involves Jews anywhere in the world, and they paint Jews as just all white folks, that's a total misnomer, and that's to the detriment of human history, to paint us all as white. I mean, look at me. Are you going to paint me as white? Anyone? Right. See, people are even shaking their heads because, yeah. And, I see people reduce Jews of color as what was the last thing someone yelled at me? Oh, Martin Luther King babies, right? The fact that we're only here because, one white Jewish person married a Black non-Jewish person, right? It's yes, that's the case for me as far as my parents are concerned, but my mom isn't totally white. My mom has Middle Eastern heritage and Asian heritage, etc. And my dad isn't totally Black. I don't know any African Americans here, unless you came straight from Africa, who don't have some type of European ancestry because of chattel enslavement, etc. And there are just too many ways that people lump all Jews together because it's convenient, right? It's convenient, and it's bad education. Bad educators go for very simplistic arguments or simplistic examples to label an entire group of people who have been on this earth as Jews for thousands of years, who have traveled to just about every continent on this planet and lived and survived and continue to survive and continue to face the same oppression that we faced since our beginning. To do that, to paint people with just one tiny thin stroke or brush is just a disservice. And I question the intellectual curiosity of those educators who want to do that.
Appreciate that, Jared. And Hannah, I have you on this question as well. Do you have any thoughts on this question? And I can happy to repeat it if needed.
I got it. Thank you so much. So I love the concept of Judaism is about living joyfully. I really believe this, and hopefully you're starting to hear it already from me, but it's not only about what we've been through that are the challenges, it's about how the Jewish people have been resilient and how they've overcome it and how they've done it with a smile. So, just a real quick example from the Torah is when we, the Jews, were released from slavery in Egypt following the 10 plagues, and you might have heard of this around the holiday Passover, we remember it. We were running away from Pharaoh, who was the leader in Egypt, and his whole army. And we came to the Sea of Reeds, and that's when Moses stretched out his staff, and then God split the sea in half. And the Israelites ran through it, and they got through safely, and it drowned the Egyptians behind them. So, what happened immediately after this? Sounds like a pretty crazy time, right? You almost died. You thought this was the end, and we sang. We have a song that we sang, and we sing it every year. And it says that Miriam took out her tambourine and she danced and she sang with the women. So it's not only about what we've gone through that are maybe not the highlights, but I think it's about the response. And that's a very Jewish response to focus on the joy and to focus on life. And of course, we need to understand what the Jewish people have gone through because it's shaped us as a whole. Maybe it makes us a little more focused on security for ourselves. Maybe some of us have a backup plan in case things don't go well in the country that we're currently living in. Perhaps some of us are more insular and skeptical of the outside world. I think just to understand why Jews are the way we are, we have to know what Jews went through, though it's very important to also teach the very happy history and all the beautiful traditions that I really applaud you and the School District of Philadelphia for taking the time to hear us out on all these other points of what it means to be Jewish.
Thank you so much. I think you all gave very thoughtful answers. I really appreciate it. Uplifting, we have a little less than 30 minutes, so I may jump around just to give my panelists a heads up. But I do think this question is very important on the education side. And I want to direct it to you, Hannah and Carly, if I may. But how do Jewish American families celebrate holidays like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, and Passover? And are there aspects of these celebrations that the community should be aware about, and community being community members here in Philadelphia, but also our school district staff that are here working with our colleagues and working with students? And I can start with you, Carly.
Sure. So yeah, and I think that when we talk about the high holy days, like Rosh Hashanah, which is at the beginning of the school year and is our Jewish New Year, what I used to like to do, as I said, since I was one of the very few Jews in my school, is I would always bring in apples and honey. I thought, let's kick off the Jewish New Year, but let's also kick off the school year. And I would share the sentiment by eating that with my students and hopefully carry that over for a sweet year to come in the school year also. I also think that another one that I would touch on that Hannah talked about is Passover. It's in the spring. The first 2 nights we host seders and family meals, and we come together and we tell this story of our Exodus. It's one of the most widely practiced traditions in the Jewish faith. So that might just mean, traveling on a school night, and then they have to come to school the next day. They might not be eating the same thing that they usually eat in the lunchroom. I know it's a lot of busy with field trips time. So even just accommodating that for students, and around the same time as Ramadan, so I think that, like, from my perspective from the museum education, is that it's always around those busy field trip times and making sure that we're accommodating for all of the different needs and feeding needs or fasting needs of any of our students around that time.
Thank you so much for that, Carly. And Hannah, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, Carly, thank you for the really practical advice for what it might mean for students and educators. So those are all really amazing holidays that you pointed out, Kyle. So we mentioned Rosh Hashanah. It's the new year. It's the Jewish New Year. It's one of the holiest days of the year. And exactly like Carly said, we dip apples in honey, and that signifies that it should be a sweet new year. So just noting, yeah, I love that idea. It's a great thing that really anyone can do in their classrooms or at home just to learn about the holiday. on top of that, so Hanukkah is the festival of lights, and that's when we light menorahs in our windows. And that's a time when traditionally we eat fried foods because we're commemorating the miracle of how the oil lasted for 8 days. So we'll eat donuts, we'll eat fried potato pancakes called latkes, and then we'll spin the dreidel. These are, again, very delicious and very fun activities. And Passover we touched on already. So just noting that it's a time where we become very, very careful, very strict about what we eat. And there is a certain food called matzah, and that replaces all bread and anything that could be leavened during this time. So absolutely, people are eating slightly different things than usual and should just be understood and even looked into, asked about why people are doing it and how can we share that culture and that story of freedom with other people, because I think that everyone can really relate in some way to the concept of freeing themselves as a people from the challenges in their lives. And I will quickly touch on the fast concept. So in Judaism, we do have fast days. We have 2 major fast days and we have 4 minor fast days every year. So one of them is on Yom Kippur, which is basically a week after Rosh Hashanah. So this is every fall. And this is a day where from the previous sundown until the next day sundown, Jews completely avoid any food and water, any kind of drinks. So it's a time of really serious introspection and reflection of the past year and thinking, how are we going into the new year with a clean slate and with pretty much the ability to fill it with a better year than the previous one. And the other fast day that's a major one that should be talked about is called Tisha B'Av. And this one is more in the summer usually. And that one is marking the destruction of the holy temples in Jerusalem. So it's a Saturday and we're mourning. So again, we're fasting entirely for basically a 25-hour period. And those are not easy. So just keeping in mind, if you have an educator, if you have a student, mostly students that young are not going to be fasting. But if you have an educator especially, or maybe parents of students, to keep in mind that maybe they're not going to be able to do any kind of parent-teacher conference or an event that evening. If something's going on, they are probably going to want to just relax at home and really reflect on these days. The 4 minor fasts I'm not going to go into because those are not as widely observed, but just to know that there are various fast days throughout the year.
Great. Thank you so much
If
for
I
that.
could just jump in really
Yes,
quick,
please,
just to
please.
say that, like, not everything is matzah for Passover, even though there are a few different types of matzah, but like just like a little bit of practical sense, as far as like observances are concerned. There are Jewish students who don't skip school for Jewish holidays because that's the way they're being raised. That's the way they're identifying. There are Jewish students who can't fast even if they do skip. You know, because of whatever medical needs they may have. Um, and when we're looking at the student body, uh, it's really important to keep in mind the variety of observances that or levels of observances that if you want to put it that way, that the Jewish students have, because it may look different, and we can't compare necessarily one person taking off of school and say, "Hey, why are you taking off? Why is David taking off while Larry is sitting here in class?" And I'll just say it just because of my own experience of being told, "Oh, you shouldn't be going because this person is staying. This person isn't taking off for that day." That those should not be the same. That would be like somebody saying, "Oh, you are going to church for Christmas Eve, and this person isn't. So we're going to have class on this day just because we know that there are some Christians who aren't going to go to church." or saying like, oh, I need a note from this funeral. Like that's another thing that teachers still do. Um, like I don't know why the funeral uh, is being pushed up when they don't know Jewish tradition of burying our dead quickly. Sometimes within 24 hours, it's been pushed back to even a week sometimes, but like usually within a few days of the actual death is the burial. um, and just like not having those key competencies around life cycle events, how Jews mourn, how Jews celebrate, how Jews like mourn and celebrate at the same time. Because I've been to many Jewish funerals where like you're walking in to the family laughing at something, right? Because they're recalling some great joke that the deceased had actually said. Um, so these are things that teachers and educators alike, because not all educators are teachers officially in the school district. Um, uh, like these are all things that people need to know in order to meet the students where they are, as they observe or not. In some circles, like Judaism is about choice, not necessarily about commandments.
Thank you so much for that. All amazing points, and I really appreciate it. For this next question, I'm gonna go to you, Carly, and I'm gonna follow up and go to you, Jared. I want to know, what role does storytelling, folklore, and history play in Jewish American heritage? I know I've heard a little bit about it, but just wanted to see if we can flesh out and share more.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about it more from like my museum education standpoint, since that's what I'm deeply entrenched in right now, is that we use storytelling to teach mostly non-Jewish students. We are teaching public school students, but we do run the gamut of Jewish day schools, supplementary schools. They all come to our museum or we go to them. And we use storytelling to really humanize the experiences and story of people of the past, so that to make them more relatable for students, for teachers. And for example, we do teach about the wave of immigration to America in the late 1880s to the 1920s. And we use material culture from our museum, specifically this one woman's life. Her name was Eva Bain, and she immigrated here in 1903. 1913. And she came from the Russian Empire. And we have artifacts that her family donated that tells her immigration story. So we push into the classroom with those artifacts, and then the kids come to the museum and we have a historical interpreter that takes on her persona. And what we find, especially when it comes to like immigration stories, is that it just opens up the conversations for, just because she's Jewish and just because she was, immigrated here over 100 years ago. Now you can tell about, do you know your family's heritage? Do you know your family's story? Do you have intersecting identities based on where your mom's family's from, where your dad's family's from, or your grandparents, or whomever you live with? And so we found that it just makes people, not just kids, more curious and invested in learning more through storytelling. And that's just one specific example that I do a lot. So I wanted to share that one. And it's really engaging and it's really interesting to hear where the conversations go. I really think it's just like a springboard and jumping off point for people to look internally about their own identities.
Thank you so much for that, Carly. And Jared, I would love your thoughts on that question as well, which
Could
is,
you repeat the question?
yeah, absolutely. So what role does storytelling, folklore, and history play in Jewish American heritage?
I mean, storytelling, history, well, especially storytelling, gets us to build a relationship with those who are no longer here, to tell their own stories. Um, it connects us not only to somebody else's past, but to our own past. Um, it also connects people to their present because that person's story might be right here, right now. Um, and it's always worth it to listen to somebody's story or be a part of a storytelling, right? To put yourself in that. I know I'm gonna mess up the theater name. Sorry, it's not my day for names. Um, but out People's Light and Theater Company, right? They did a multiracial version of The Diary of Anne Frank as a full play years ago, and it got a big uproar from a lot of people, but it also got an even bigger wave of humanity and positive humanity, I should say, because there were a lot of people from different backgrounds who could see themselves inside of the Diary of Anne Frank, inside of systemic oppression, um, also connecting histories. You know, what if we want to just go back to World War II for a second? Um, and right before that, the laws that they enacted regarding Jews, regarding the disabled, regarding the Romani, etc., those were all learned here. You know, the Nazis literally came to the United States to learn how we were treating Black and Indigenous people and Jews, how the United States was treating Jews, because Jews have been in here in this country for hundreds of years, since New Amsterdam, actually, you know, and wanted to replicate those things, wanted to replicate the experiments, you know, that were done that created fields of study like gynecology and et cetera. Um, Wanted to replicate those. And like part of my family, a relative of mine was forced uh, to be a part of those experiments at age 11 until she escaped from Auschwitz when she was 17. You know, so it and all that experimentation, all of that connects not only Jewish history, but it connects Black American history and Black history under colonialism, Black history um, under systemic oppression with the oppression of Jews throughout the world. Because you know, World War II and the Nazis, they didn't just go for the Jews in Europe. They literally had a map of every single Jew, like labeling how many Jews were in each country, each island, where they were, and there are Holocaust survivors from North Africa where there were also death camps. All of these things are connected, and we won't get to those things unless people can actually see themselves and connect themselves, and that is definitely where storytelling comes into play. That's definitely where showing people facts and figures comes into play. That is where all of this is necessary in order to reach the minds of people who can chart a different course for humanity.
Can I piggyback? Am I allowed to interject?
We're only we have a few more questions, and we
Okay.
typically don't take questions from the audience.
Okay.
Feel free to enter in the chat if that's okay, Sarah.
Okay, no, that's fine.
All right. And Penis, I have we have about 12 minutes left, and about 3 more questions that I really want to get to. So I'll try. We'll see how we do. We'll direct this next question to Carly. As an educator, how can educators and community members incorporate Jewish traditions and culture into events and other activities in a respectful way? This could include presentations on food, art, culture, traditions, or across the board.
I do want to share out, and I think I mentioned it in the working group that I was in part of with a few people that were in this group. But like, I think that the family day that we just hosted at the museum this past Sunday was a great example of that. It was a dual heritage family day where we had, since it's Jewish American Heritage Month and also it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, let's just merge them together. Let's have we incorporated traditional dances from both cultures and musicians from from all different cultures. Sorry, not both cultures, all different cultures. We had a challah braiding station next to the henna hand painting station. And then, you know, we had I think it's just focusing on that joy again, not just from Jewish joy, but also the joyfulness of cultures that you're trying to incorporate and overlap, and being respectful, obviously, in those ways. I think when it comes to being respectful, specifically for food, for Jewish, um, for people who observe the kosher laws of Judaism, is just keeping that in mind too. For example, some Jews don't eat pork or shellfish or mixing meat and dairy. So if you are hosting an event, keeping things like that in mind. As we talked about the Jewish Sabbath, if you're hosting an event and you're going to have it on a Saturday, then more religious Jewish people are not going to come, or any other holiday that we do celebrate and observe and have observances like that. So I think that also it doesn't necessarily even have to be, um, when it comes to that too, that we can also have incorporation of, for example, I had like We Rock the Spectrum come to a family day. That's not a religious organization in any way, but it's showing, hey, you're going to show up in a Jewish museum. That just shows allyship. That shows solidarity. It's just a kids' gym that's based on inclusion. And it's just like, if you have that mission and that goal in mind, it doesn't have to be religious, it doesn't have to be cultural, but it just like, let's show up in allyship and solidarity among people, person to person.
Great, I really appreciate that. And another question I have for you, Carly, and for Jared is, what are some ways that community members can partner with Jewish American organizations to promote cultural awareness? And I can start with you, Jared.
I mean, speaking engagements is one thing. Um, you know, Service projects are another. Those are two steadfast ways. But also if you're going to have Jewish representation, that it not just be, this is my gripe and the gripe of like, over 1 million Jews in this country, is that most of the time when they reach out for DEI work, as far as Jews are concerned, and Jews should be included in DEI work, full stop. Um, Being a religious community, or anything else that like it's folks who look like, I don't know, the um, Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL, just like white straight guys who are Jews, like representing the entire Jewish community, because thanks to Hollywood and everything else, people think that the only Black Jewish folks or Jewish folks of color are like Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet, which I would love to have Shabbat dinner with them. If anybody knows them, give them my number. Um, but it's not just Lisa Bonet and Lenny Kravitz, right? It's not just cousins of like Al Roker, and other folks that I know, right? Um, it's also folks like myself, many other folks who live in Philadelphia, people who go to various synagogues in the area, and people who don't. We have over 36,000 Jews of color in the greater Philadelphia area, right? So that's a significant chunk of the Jewish community. That's like 15, 16% of our Jewish community here in the greater Philadelphia area. And if that's not being represented in the speakers you bring in and in the organizations you bring in, then you haven't you haven't touched the full scope. You've gotten the tip of the iceberg. As much as I love the work that ADC and the Weitzman do, and Weitzman and Jews and All Hughes are working on a project together as well. But this is one thing. Look beyond what Hollywood tells you is Jewish, right? Look beyond, I mean, even I can even think about Key and Peele sketches, uh, where like the Jewish representation was all white, or in the Chappelle Show, or anywhere else, or sometimes even on Saturday Night Live. They had Maya Rudolph for how many years, and barely showed any part of her Jewish heritage or anything like that. This is diversity is not just one specific thing. That is actually the opposite of diversity. Equity is not just one type of person representing the entirety of a people. That is the opposite of equity. But so
Thank you for that, Jared. Hannah, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I can touch on this because I know we're at the end, and I think it's really important to talk about diversity when we're talking about the Jewish community. So, as Jared's really painted the picture, there's no one Jewish experience or reality or look. It doesn't exist. And so, to understand that, like, I wish I could have the time to share with you about my friends, my Jewish friends from India, from Iran, from Argentina, Sweden, Yemen, Ethiopia, literally all around the world. I have friends who are Jews from these countries, either born and raised or their parents. And it is not so long ago that major shifts in the political and just cultural situations of their countries have forced many of these Jews to leave their countries, which is why they're now in America as a place of refuge, why they're now in Israel as a place of refuge for the Jewish people, and other certain countries that have let them in and allowed them to grow and to live their lives as free Jews. But to really focus on the fact that just because I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, which means that since we as Jews are actually a diasporic nation, right? Our homeland is in Judea and Samaria and Israel. We, since the expulsion, and we've been sent all over the world, have ended up in different parts of the world. So my family were Ashkenazi for the most part. In recent years, we were in Eastern Europe, but that's not to say that it's any better or any less than a Jew whose family ended up in the Middle East or in Spain or in any other part of the world. So if anything, it adds beauty, it adds richness and culture and diversity to the Jewish people and the Jewish experience. And to think about, okay, what does it mean to be a Jew? I hope that everyone can just keep in mind the fact that everyone is going to be unique and everyone is bringing some beautiful background into their story. So to take the time to hear their story and to figure out how can you relate to their story, because we probably have a lot more in common than we think.
Absolutely. Really appreciate that. So I'm looking, we have about 3 minutes, and I have one question I would love to get the opinion of all of our panelists. So for those who may watch this video and are not as familiar or in close proximity to Jewish communities, what kind of exhibits, events, programs, and this could be within the city of Philadelphia or just digitally online, what type of events would you recommend to explore to reflect Jewish life and Jewish American life? This can include museums and cultural centers as well. And I could start with you, Hannah.
So I think that being able to focus on the joy and the diversity and to pick a little bit more specific within Jewry to say, okay, we're going to dive deeper into the Middle Eastern Jews or the Jews who were living in Spain until the expulsion in 1492, or the Jews who have been in America for centuries, like whatever it may be. We're gonna look and see what do we have in common. What is a piece of the culture or the history, the food, the anything that we can really highlight and show in a very positive way in that story of resilience.
I can go Carly and then Jared in our final minute. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I have to plug my own museum. I think
Absolutely.
but not just like coming in person, but we have public programs online that touch on musical performances and cookbook launches too. And we have the Philadelphia Jewish Film and Media under our umbrella. So there's so many different ways to engage. And also my personal to-do list, just I've heard like from giving tours to students and adults, is that they said that I have to go to the Tenement Museum in New York City. I haven't been there yet, but I heard it's wonderful. And that's like next on my personal to-do list. So if you've never heard of that either, look into that too, as you know, since it is just a quick ride away. And the other one is the new museum in New Orleans. As a Tulane grad, that's also my top to-do list. Next time I go to New Orleans, there's a new Jewish museum of the Southern Jewish experience there.
Thank you so much, Carla and Jared. In our last 30 seconds.
Yeah. One thing I always wanted to do is bring more Jews of color to Philadelphia, right? Including like Rain Pryor, who's the daughter of Richard Pryor, who has a show called Fried Chicken and Latkes about growing up Black and Jewish. But also, there's so many, like there's an entire show on the West Coast about Jews of color and their experiences and just in general, going along with bringing the joy, but also like bringing the history, and just a plug for Jews and All Hues and the Weitzman. Like we are working on a project to fill in the gaps of all Jewish history, Jewish American history, by reaching and getting artifacts from Jews of color, so that we can have a fuller picture of the American Jewish landscape as it's been developing. So we will need help with that as time goes on over the next few years. And it would be great to hear from more Jewish people of color, maybe not, Hebrew Israelites or Messianics, because that's kind of outside the scope, but just to hear from more Jews of color and Jewish people in general who are in the Philadelphia area and around the country wanting to connect Jewish history like that.
Great. Thank you all so much. I want to send a special thank you to all the panelists who took the time to join today. We really appreciate it. And also thank you for everyone who was able to join. We're just a minute over, but if you know a colleague, a community member who might enjoy a presentation like this or a discussion like this, we'll be posting this on our YouTube page. And I'll also send a copy out in a few days to everyone who registered. So I want to send thank you to everyone, and I hope everyone has a great day. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Thank you.